Hello, everyone.
Yay. That's a good looking group right there. We're just missing Rudy. Where's Rudy? Hi, Dan. Oh, and Indira. Sorry. Should I sing? I'm just kidding.
I see
Like-
Raul has an appropriate background on his.
I know.
That's pretty cool.
He really sets the bar for all of us really high with this whole Zoom thing.
It's perfect for tonight. Very appropriate.
I know.
Uh-huh.
I know. Okay, let me get my reading glasses because Paula didn't make my agenda font big enough.
There's Rudy. Hi, Rudy. It's nice to see our guests from Schoolworks and IEP here. We've got community members, staff members.
I don't see the newspaper. This should be an interesting meeting for the newspaper. No? Want me to text Indira and see if she's on her way? Does Michael get a pass this meeting?
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Mhm. Oh, there's Indira the doggy. That's so cute. Okay, I think everybody's here. Do you think I should just charge forward?
Let's go forward. Thank you.
Okay, so I am calling to order open session at 5:31 with all board members present. Clerk Lopez Jones. I'm gonna do roll call, okay? So,
I apologize. The
oh, I can't
connection
hear you,
is
Indira.
really bad.
You're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Maybe turn up the volume a little bit. Say testing,
Can you
testing.
hear me now?
No, I think she's having, you might have to go off, Indira, and come back on.
I can hear
Okay,
Julie.
we'll go ahead and move forward with Trustee Maxfield.
Here.
No?
Guys, don't forget to unmute. It has
Can
to
you
be
now?
audible. So Trustee
Okay.
Maxfield?
Here.
No, something's going on, Paula.
Julie, I think it's yours because we can all hear them.
Yeah, I can hear too.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't hear anybody else. I can't hear Jeff.
Maybe,
Can you guys hear Jeff?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on.
Her Bluetooth.
Mhm.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it's the AirPods, sorry. Okay, so we did Trustee Maxfield, Trustee Gonzalez,
Here.
Trustee Rothberg Allen.
Here.
Wonderful. And we'll try, did we get Indira back on or I kicked her off for no reason?
She came off and she'll come back on, but we could hear her, so it should be fine.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and let you share your screen, Paula, and unmute for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oops, sorry. Okay, ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the
flag
of the United States
States
of
of
America
America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
Sorry about the dog in the background. Okay. So do we have any changes, Erin, on the agenda?
We do not, Julie.
Sorry, I had to yell at the dog. Okay, so we are looking for a motion to go ahead and approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Great. And looking for a second?
Second.
Thanks, Rudy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. And then the district mission statement. We are a collaborative, culturally rich educational community where a rigorous and innovative curriculum prepares our students to be successful contributors to our global society. And that brings us to 2.1, public business from the floor on non-agendized items. So this portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the board on any item regarding board business that is not on the agenda. Without taking action or entering into a dialogue with the public, board members may briefly respond to statements made or ask clarifying questions about topics posed by the public. Your matter may be referred to administration, and we limit it to 3 minutes per speaker. Did we have anybody who wanted to speak, Paula? Okay.
Nope.
Perfect. Then we'll get on to the fun stuff. 3.1, our facilities master plan, and I'm going to hand it over to Erin to go ahead and introduce everybody.
Well, as you are aware, the purpose of tonight's meeting is for the board to review the facilities master plan. So this is an opportunity for our trustees and the public who've joined us to ask questions and make comments on the proposed plan. So we have Tim Haley, Mike Cannon, and Ken Reynolds here from IEP Squared and Schoolworks who are going to present the draft to you. So Tim, would you like to start?
I unmuted. I got to start. So thank you for inviting us tonight. And I think everybody raised their hand when you said their name, but just in case, you guys from Schoolworks and IEP2, can you raise your hands just so that everybody knows? Okay, there we go. All right. So thank you for doing this tonight. And as you know, we've been working on this master plan for some time. There's been a few little interruptions as we've gone along. Everybody's been hanging in there to do a great job at it. So we really appreciate that. The reason why you have to do a master plan is a number of things that kind of come about. One is that it's been some time since you've done a master plan. Demographics have changed. The place where we look at from a standpoint of what's going on in the community, some of that has changed. CDE requires some of the information that goes into the master plan so that if you apply for funding, it's in there as well. There's a number of reasons besides that, and one of them is you need some plans to determine, okay, where are we headed in regards to our facilities and what are the needs that we have. Maintenance can do a lot, and Chris does a great job with the maintenance sides of things, but there's still ages of buildings and the functions of buildings that are really important. And so this addresses both the age and the function as we go through it. I'm going to start with are we going to bring up the master plan, or does everybody have a copy? Or should I bring
We're going to actually bring it up, Tim, on the screen.
Okay. You want to bring it? You're bringing it up?
Yeah, Paul is going to do that.
All right. Good. Okay. So this is the master plan, the proper master plan. There is an appendix that goes along with it. So there's a bunch of other pages that are going to be added to it. Most of it's notes and other information that supports the master plan. The first section of this is the acknowledgements and who's been involved. And then we move into the next one, if you can. The table of contents, and then the executive summary. And the executive summary really brings everything to the forefront. So it's kind of a mini version of the entire facility master plan. And we try to do that because there's lots of different kinds of readers out there. And when we get to CDE, a lot of them like to just go to the executive summary, see what we've done, make sure that we've checked off all the things that we want to do in regards to community involvement and all the other things that we have done in regards to the process. So they typically go to the executive summary, and then the next step is just the rest of the document is an expansion of the executive summary. So the executive summary talks about the process, talks about the master plan goals that were established, and we'll go into detail once we get into the sections of these, but the focus groups that were put together to kind of get into the various information like ed services and school athletics and ed PE and bus and food facilities and all those kinds of things. We met with a lot of folks, some of them duplicates, because everybody wears a number of hats in Calistoga, so a lot of them attended a number of meetings. And then we went into demographics and enrollment, and we're going to talk a little bit more detail in regards to that as we get back into the section. And then the facility assessments. And the facility assessments really are assessments of the existing buildings, the conditions, the functions, the site conditions, the site function, and the combined score. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. And then options development. So everything builds from the top down. We collect all the data, we collect all the information, we put together all that data and information, and then we begin to take a look at, okay, how can we solve some of the needs, and how can we figure out what's the best way of implementing the development of the best option that we have. So this is the option development side of it, and it talks about the various components. One is the overall campus, and the next one is about the overall campus at, this is the elementary school, and then the next one is the overall campus at the high school, junior high, high school. And then the next one talks about, oh, now we're going to get into the process of the whole overall master plan. So this is the beginning of the process. And stop me along the way if you want to ask questions, because now we're going to get into some details and the information of how we went about doing the various parts and pieces of the facility master plan. As you know, there's been a lot of different things that have happened, starting with some assessments that we completed way back in 2019. Then the Kincaid fire came along and we slowed up and didn't move very quickly. And then after the Kincaid fire came the Glass fire, and then came COVID, which we're still dealing with. And so we had some community meetings, and then we came back and we had another community meeting, and we had staff meetings, and we had the focus groups. All these things got kind of broken up into various parts and pieces as we went through the process. And so this process thing is a little unusual for a facility master plan, but it needed to be told. The story needed to be told. The Calistoga folks have, you guys have stuck in there very well. to get a great master plan done. So that's the beginning of the process, and we're at the end of the process where we bring this facility master plan to the board. There isn't a date there yet because we're in a draft form yet and waiting for input from this meeting. So the staff and community involvement, there was a planning committee put together. The planning committee was, the members are up front in the acknowledgement section, and they've met 2 or 3 times during the process. The first job was to put together facility master plan goals. And as your board president mentioned right at the very beginning of your meeting, your missions, the facility master plan goals really reflect a lot of the mission statement as well. So you can read those. It's, you know, our school facilities will be planned spaces that designated to promote collaboration, innovation that supports successful instruction and learning at all grade levels. Our facilities will also be planned and designed to assist students in becoming influential contributors within our global society. And our schools will be responsive and challenging students to be empowered by choosing active, healthy life choices. And our school facilities will be safe while providing positive environments that celebrate a culturally diverse district. Now, the reason why this is important is because we judge all our options to these goals. And when we get to the end and we start talking about options and implementation, we want to make sure that we're meeting these goals as a part of it. And the facility master plan committee spent some time looking at this. It is all derived out of your mission statement and the overall district goals. So that's where these came from. So we had 2 community meetings. One of them was live, and this is a picture of the live community meeting. And then we had another one later, and it was by video. And there was a lot of information and a lot of good thoughts. Some of the disconnect sometimes was we had to go back and redo some of the information so that we could really verbalize where people were going. So it took a couple of good meetings to get to that point. So one of the things that we really took a look at hard was the Galis property and whether or not it could be used for a school in the future. And we found some issues with this one. And I don't know, Mike, if you would like to talk a little bit about the Galis property, maybe you might be able to bring that up a little bit more in more detail.
Well, very briefly, the property that you own out along Highway 29 really has only one access point that can be used by the school itself, and that's along Highway 29. You have a potential access point down in the far southeast or southwest corner, but that's right at the bend of a road. You might be able to use that as an emergency entrance, and probably would be your best point for your utility access if you built on the property. But the problem is going to be getting access to the property. That would require a left turn lane from Caltrans. And if any of you have ever dealt with Caltrans, you know how much time and effort that will take to get that done. The property has at least one virtue. It's flat, and it's a reasonable size for a small middle school, which is one of the things we looked at, or a small elementary school. Anything much larger, you would probably have to get an exemption from the Department of Education, which is doable, but you would still have to go through that. If you built a school out there, you would have to build not only classrooms, but also a multi-purpose building and a gym if you were doing a middle school, as well as a couple of specialty classrooms and some other pieces. And I will tell you right now, the cost of construction is rather high. I think I did an estimate back in December, and then I looked at it again, I think last month, with one of your teachers who sits on the board of an adjacent school district. And the estimate I had of $35 to $40 million for a new school has bumped up considerably since then. So absent a windfall for the district, I don't know that that is buildable under your current financial conditions. Okay. Tim, you want me to talk a little bit about the elementary school?
Yeah, one of the other things that we discovered as a part of our initial discovery was this flood hazard area. So Mike.
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the things I always do when I'm doing a facility master plan is I check the Corps of Engineers flood maps. Because among other things, when I retired, I was the assistant superintendent of the only school district in California that was entirely in a flood zone and a floodplain. So I'm very paranoid about that. But what we discovered was that you have, as you can see by the map on page 14, you have most of your buildings within what's called a regulatory floodplain, and the rest of it within a 1% annual floodplain. What that means effectively is that the Department of Education and the State Architect's Office will not give you permission to build on that site unless you elevate whatever new buildings or construction you're putting in there above the floodplain level, which in this case is between 6 and 7 feet, depending on where you put the new buildings. That would be very costly. So that informed a lot of what we recommended for the elementary school and how we approached modernization at that school. So.
See the next slide.
Julie, you're on mute if you're trying
One
to say
sec.
something.
Yeah, I am sorry. Indira, did you want to stop and have a question?
Yes, I know that the Gallus property at one point was, was was purchased with the intention of building building another facility based on enrollment, based on the needs of the children in the district. But at this point, I would like to ask, what are the projections of, enrollment increasing in the district, or, what, maybe Erin, you or Michael have an idea?
Well, actually, that is the next thing that we were going to talk about, and Ken Reynolds, who did the demographics, is going to talk to you about that. So take it away, Ken.
All right, do we want to advance to the next page?
Yes.
Or
Okay. Now, you
maybe
keep
it's
going.
just after that.
Yeah. Two more. There
Yeah,
we
here
go.
we go. Yeah, so as a part of the master plan, we always like to take a look at the history of the enrollment and the overall demographics, look at what's going on in the housing market and any developments that are going on, and really do a comprehensive analysis of what we predict the future will look like in terms of overall enrollment. And so on this page here, you can see we show 10 years of historic enrollment, and then this is as of October for each school year, and we're showing 6 years into the future. So overall, in the history, what we're seeing is a slight increase overall, but what's really telling is if we look at the colors we use on here, the orange color represents our elementary grades. The light green color represents our junior high grades. And then the light blue color represents our high school grades. And we can see that the elementary was growing and then it's been declining. So a little bit of a V curve there. And the other interesting one is looking at the high schools. numbers, those have really significantly increased the last few years. And so there's basically a large bubble at our high school grades. So when we look into the future, we see the elementary decline goes down a little bit more, but it sort of stabilizes. And then that bubble that's at the junior high school will graduate out, and those numbers become more stable as we reach years 4, 5, and 6. So overall, it looks like we're declining a little bit, but it's really just the fact that we're graduating out some larger classes, and then the enrollments overall stabilize. So we've already accounted for development activity, and I said it's slow and manageable. I think we're anticipating 23 to 24 new homes being built per year over our 6-year study. So again, that's been taken into account in these numbers. Again, we'd see a bigger decline because of the lower birth data if it wasn't for the fact that we had a little bit of development planned in the area. And then of course, the following page just goes into a little more details. It shows our analysis of all the birth data. So the chart on the top, those blue bars represent our kindergarten over the last 10 years or so. And then the yellow bars represent our projected kindergarten over the next 4 years. And that analysis is done based on looking at how many children are born each year. And then those numbers are translated to 5 years forward to represent how many corresponding kindergartners show up in the school district. And so there's a pretty decent capture rate. But again, the number of births has just been declining. That blue line there, again, shows the births that happened 5 years prior to those kindergarten classes. And so again, the numbers have dropped just a little bit. And so that's what's creating some of the smaller, but relatively stable incoming classes. And then the other interesting chart to look at is on the bottom of the page. For the current school year, that represents the number of students in each grade by those green bars. And then the blue line sort of across the top of the page there represents back when that class started kindergarten in the district, how many students were in the kindergarten class. And so we can see if we've got some classes where there's a bubble of students or a small number of students. And so we can see that at the high school grades are some of our larger classes. And we can also see that we had some larger kindergarten classes in the past, but when we look at our current class sizes, number of students per grade, it is a more stable number. And so those larger classes we started with in kindergarten have resulted in smaller classes in the current middle school grades.
I do want to add too, Ken, the projected enrollments going forward through 2025 are quite different from the 2015 master plan that we passed back in 2015. So the 2025 enrollment back then was projected to be at 901, and in our new master plan, that enrollment is down at 818. So Indira, there's a big change between the last master plan that we completed compared to this master plan with enrollment. We're not going to see the high numbers like originally planned with the 2015 plan.
Yeah, and again, the key factors there is probably mainly just looking at those birth numbers. You know, compared to 5, 6 years ago, we kept anticipating that the birth numbers might turn around and start increasing, or at least wouldn't continue declining. But every year, as we get in new data, the numbers have continued to show lower numbers across the state. And of course, these numbers here are just representing your local area. So again, we don't have the numbers from 2020 yet. So as soon as the numbers are compiled from last calendar year, it's going to be interesting to see what, again, the number of births that happened during the pandemic year. But again, we're going to continue monitoring that. And so it's, when it comes to that site, you know, the numbers here don't show it, that you're going to grow to the point where a second elementary site is needed. But, you know, development can happen, more housing can be built. And in that situation, right, it could create an increase. So it's going to be something that just needs to be monitored over time. And again, the bursts give us a good window about 4 or 5 years into the future. But any projections beyond that, right, you're having to make a lot of assumptions. And so that's why we usually like to only go about 5 or 6 years. So we're limited on the number of assumptions that have to be made.
And what I understood from most of the report was that even if that does grow, we still are only somewhere between 65 and 68% capacity anyway, right?
Yeah, the capacity issue is a little complex. And I think the next page of our report here actually shows our projections for the 2 campuses in comparison to capacity. That capacity was calculated based on the number of classrooms for each site and what the loading standards that we're using are. You know, the capacity fluctuates depending on how you use your classroom spaces. And, you know, with all the special programs that are run, especially some of the special ed programs, and then at the junior high, senior high, you know, when you start getting to CTE programs and any of the specialty rooms, a lot of times it's harder to load, especially in a small school situation, it's hard to load those spaces at the full capacity. And so we could be using most of the spaces on a campus and we think we're at our capacity, but there could be more space just by, you know, hopefully better filling the classes that we're operating or making sure they're being used every period when we're talking our secondary campus. So again, depending on which rooms are used for what purpose and how much space the different programs you're operating need, those capacities can fluctuate. This was simply a classroom-based capacity analysis.
I'm just curious, Indira, did you feel like you got your answer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So you might take the next page too, Mike, Ken, because the next page has a little bit more on it.
Yeah, on this
Actually,
page, we
can keep going, but I want you to circle back to the flood thing because I wanted to hear more about that.
right. Yeah, on this page of the demographics, again, we look at the current enrollment compared to our 6-year projection. And again, the main focus here is if we see any schools that are projected to be over capacity or close to capacity, then we need to focus on adding capacity in the master plan. Here we were showing that there was adequate space for, you know, just the core student populations. You know, sometimes space will be needed for some of the specialty programs you want to operate, but the basic classroom counts were sufficient as part of this analysis.
So we can go back to the flood zone if you would like.
You want me to go back to that page, or you just want to talk about
Yeah,
it?
that would be great if you would.
Okay.
And you have, somebody has a question about, more questions about the flood hazard?
Sorry, I didn't know if you had finished that or not. I just didn't want to miss that. What I was curious about was, is this newer legislation or was this also part of our initial bond master plan that these types of regulations were in place?
Well, I can tell you that it certainly predates 2012, probably back to, I would say, at least the mid 2000s when the Corps of Engineers started pursuing these things widely. So
It was not mentioned, I don't believe, in the 2015.
it was not, and I was looking for it.
Yeah.
I was thinking even further back with the initial bond, 3 phases, whether or not. So,
Yeah, we have not, we have not seen any information concerning this in any of the other documentation that we've looked at.
okay.
So,
Mike, you were saying that's not a typical search that someone doing a master plan might search on, just because it's not a common thing?
It's not a common thing. I do it because I know what the effect of it is. I have seen some other master plans that have it, but I've not seen a great many of them that will have a section, for example, on environmental hazards or something like this, which is what this would be. There will be some folks that do it. I know that Ken and Tim and I do that on all of our master plans, but I would say not more than 15 or 20% of the other master plans produced generally by architectural firms will do that.
Some of the other things that we look at are soil conditions, and there's quite a bit of responsibility from a standpoint of like liquefaction and
right.
Some of the other things that affect your foundations and how you build things and affect the construction costs. And it's just one of the habits that we have is that every time we get involved, especially when there's a river next door, to take a look at those kinds of
issues.
Concerns. Yeah.
I will say that in the last 10 years, the facilities section at Department of Education has become much more alert to these kinds of things, not just flood zones, but as Tim says, liquefaction in various areas of the state, other natural or geological hazards. Apparently the Department of Education got into some sort of trouble back in the early 2000s when they missed something. Yeah, anecdotally, I've been told down in LA Unified, and LA built a high school right on top of an active oil field. Not a good idea.
So I'd like to go to the next page, I believe. Yeah.
Community survey.
Yeah, we kind of missed this a little bit, and I think it's really important that we did survey both the community and the staff. It was a fairly comprehensive survey, went out to a lot of folks, and we got really good information back concerning the current schools, the current environment, and so this kind of data helps us in regards to where do we go with the options. And all the data that we've been talking about really helps us when it goes, when we go into the options. So Mike, the next thing is facility assessments. Paula, if you could flip to, I think it's page 22. So this is the facility assessments, and we kind of mentioned it before, but it gets a little bit more detailed from a standpoint of what is in the building function, building condition, site function, and site condition. These are the items that we look at. And Mike, if you could go through this would be great. But you got to unmute first.
Okay. What the facilities assessment team did is, along with Chris, we went to each of the sites and went through every space in every building on each of the sites. And then on a couple of them got up and looked at the roof as well. So we probably bored Chris more than he even wants to admit. But in any case, what we did was we went through the entire assessment process, and we did it as sort of a scoring matrix, if you will. If you want to hit the next slide. Okay. Basically what it does is it says that if you have a brand new buildings are just like cars. You drive them off the lot, you have immediate depreciation. Okay. So one of the questions that was asked in one of the community meetings in December was, why is the new building over at the high school not 100%? And the response was, at the time we did the assessment, it was 2 years old, and it was already depreciating somewhat. And there were also a couple of comments from the public and a couple of the focus groups about one or two of the things that might have been added to it, which knocked its scores down. But basically, what we did was we went through all of the spaces and rated all of them for condition, functionality, which made a combined score. So you may have a space that's in good condition but is not being used, or not suitable for what it's being used for. Or you may have, as you have a couple of spaces at the high school, places that are not really functional for what they're being used for and are not in very good condition. So that's what gets you to scores on your assessment board. If you wish, you can take a look in the appendix section where we have it broken out by building for each of the sites, actually for all of the sites. Okay. Next.
So if you go back one, so taking a look at the elementary school side, so you can see that the brown at the bottom is the lowest score, the blue at the top is the highest score. So from a color standpoint, you can see where the buildings ended up on the elementary school campus. Now, if anybody's familiar with building number, the one out there on the right,
Number 33, yes.
Yeah, the book storage building is not a very great building. So it's in the brown.
Yeah, it's neither really functional nor is it in great condition. So,
right. And then when you get to building 33, it has got some functional issues as well as building issues, but we have since discovered that that's where all the electrical comes for the campus. So there's some real debate, can you knock it down and move that stuff? Is that the most prudent thing to do? Or do you do something with that building to continue to house that electrical and
right.
Structure? So those are the kinds of things that we've discovered as a part of this work. And the reason why the multi-purpose at 53 and 57, the reason why they're that low is because of functionality more than anything else.
Yeah. The major issue with your multi-purpose building is you cannot get all of your students into it, either for a rally or an all-school meeting or anything of that nature. And the green buildings that you have noted there are green because they were rehabbed, I believe, in 2015, 2016 by the district. Okay, so they were modernized and rehabbed at that time. So want to turn to the next page, please. Okay. The junior high and high school, I think I mentioned that the what did you call it? The multi-purpose building, which has only been up for a couple of years, has a 79 rating. That's due to a combination of functionality and just the fact that it's a couple of years old now. The blue building, which is your new gym, is much higher. That's at a mid-80s score. Most of the rest of the campus is in yellow, varying from 50 to 65. I will note that most of the buildings in the lower left-hand corner, they're all marked as 60, are all what are called permanent portables. Those were put there, or at least those date back to the 1980s. They had a shelf life of 20 years, and so they're at least twice beyond their age now. And when we take a look at the the utilization plan and then the finals, you'll note that we're recommending that all of those be taken away and replaced. Okay. You also have a pair of brown buildings marked in the center of the compound where you have your theater and I believe your art building. Those are standard classrooms that were reworked for their functions. And the problem is that they don't really function as well for spaces as they could. And what was done to them in order to make them even minimally functional has given Tim and I both some serious concerns, both as far as some of the electrical and structural concerns on those two buildings. So that's why they are scored so low. Okay, next one. Okay, Tim.
So taking all of this information, all the data, putting it together, we began to take a look at what can we do. And obviously we have room on the Calistoga Elementary School site to house more students, but we have special programs that are taking up some of those spaces. And even some of those special programs have some concern in regards to the amount of space that they need. They actually need some other kind of space or space that's better suited for what they're doing. So as we develop the options, we put together the information concerning, you know, where do we go from here? What kind of thoughts do we have? And there was various maps developed that kind of talked about what the different options might be for the campus. So if you go to the next slide, next page. So this is the elementary school campus, and this is our beginning analysis of that elementary school campus, and where the site is accessible and where there's good fencing and bad fencing. And we've got the up there next to the solar on the north side where the river is, there's an access point down to the river. So it talks about all the buildings, and it also has the assessment scores on this sheet as well, so that you can see kind of what the assessments are for each one of the buildings. The yellow marks are site access points, and the light blue is a fence line that's kind of there but not there. And then you can see some of the other access points. There's a lot of access points around the perimeter, not as bad here as there is on the high school site, but quite a few. And recently Chris has added the fence along the front of the next to building 12 and building 3. So that's all been improved since we started the master planning process. So, which helps in regards to some control in regards to people getting on campus. And this slide talks about the various components from a functional standpoint, what they're used for. And we kind of talked about the little storage building up near the river on the north side and the condition of it. And that's a book storage building that is about ready to fall over soon. And then the next building to it, the green one, is the PE, indoor PE room. And if we could accommodate that inside the campus someplace, it would be a lot better for access and some of the other ideas. And it's actually too small for indoor PE. We can get one class in there, and that's about it. The rest of it, it just basically, this is an analysis chart that helps us define the functional areas. And then the community gave us some input, the staff gave us some input, and that's what's illustrated with this plan. You know, they would like to have access to the creek, but can they do it? And can it be done safely? And that's one of the considerations. There's some limited staff and adult toilets on this campus. The staff room is too small to house all the teachers that we have on the campus. Down in the left-hand corner, you can see we need to accommodate a sensory room, an occupational therapy office, the science storage, the staff lounge, the PE, CES program, the gym, makerspace, meeting space for all. And there's various components and parts that we've talked about with the community. Some came from the survey, some came from input meetings. And this is the junior senior high site plan. The same analysis was done there from a standpoint of access and the standpoint of fencing and the same standpoint of security around the campus. And some of and I forgot to mention on the elementary school, just the circulation of vehicular traffic. And you know, we were there in the morning, we were there in the afternoon to watch the comings and goings of vehicles on both campuses. And that's reflected in our planned approach to the project. It's a little bit more difficult on the elementary school because of the flood zone requirements, because if we even expand the parking, it's a huge dollar amount because there's a lot of drainage requirements and a lot of environmental things that you have to do in regards to even expanding parking areas. Now we can, at the elementary school, we can do some playground improvements and we can add some things that help protect around the playground. But enlarging the elementary school is much more difficult than it can be done here at the high school or the senior high. And this is again the functional program that happens on the campus, and we talk a lot about the uses of these buildings and the text. And when you have a chance, you might take a look at all the text. I'm not going to read it all, but you know, there's a lot of information there, and a lot of information that has gone through in order to get to where we're at today. And I might mention, I might mention the CTE program that's highlighted up at the top, and that's one of the things that we really started to begin to hit hard is how can we accommodate an expansion of that? How can we work with science and kind of develop a program that would accommodate both science and CTE programs so that they can work together. And of course, we've got 7th and 8th graders using the science, as well as 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So we have to be very careful as to how that is all planned. Now you can go. Thank you. And this is the same information that came from on the high school, that came from the survey, as well as input meetings. Down in the right-hand corner, the need to accommodate science, project rooms, occupational therapy offices again, and then the music room. And one of the things that came about was the theater and how that might work into the overall plan. And because right now it's housed in a kind of a classroom, and it's poorly sufficing the functionality of a theater. And so how can we improve that? And a part of the master plan you'll see is that there's some work going on in the community that might help and assist that. So we also took a look at the Palisades campus. We did do a study on it. We went over, looked at it. We did an assessment. We You know, it ranked in a 61 out of the 100. There's some limited parking problems. There's some access issues. The high school, the grounds aren't used very well, so there's some issues there as well that we have identified. And we also looked at administration and maintenance, even though right now they don't need to expand, but there is places that need to be reserved for their expansion if necessary in the future. So that's the reason why we took a look at both of those. Now, Chris has done a new IT office that is going in, and it's taking up some of the storage. So eventually you might get to the point where you're going to need more storage for goods for both campuses. So this is a implementation plan, and I know Mike and Ken might have some input as we go through this. The implementation plan is now, we've taken a look at the options, taken a look at the information that has been given to us, and we've discovered along the way. And as I said at the very beginning, we want to make sure that it fits the goals of the district. And over on the left-hand side, you'll see that everything that we're recommending really follows those goals. It's a check to make sure that we're not doing something that isn't necessary, and it's something that really meets the goals of the district, meets the goals of the facility master plan. So the limited footprints at Calistoga Elementary School limits the expansion, but it doesn't say that we can't improve spaces. And it doesn't say that we can't repurpose and reutilize spaces within existing buildings. So basically, that's what we're doing on the elementary school campus. From the multi-purpose room and the back area in the library where there's an extra space, and there's been some movement towards doing some of this already, but just reorganizing that building. Now, there's some problems with coolers and freezers and some equipment issues that we need to solve at the same time. The administration spaces needs to be reorganized. We probably can squeeze some additional space out of it. There's some canopies that we might be able to go out into as long as we maintain the same footprint. There's a number of things that we can do, but we basically are improving what we've got in the Calistoga Elementary School campus. So if you flip to the next page, you can see that coming together. So we removed the book storage building and we accommodated inside the other buildings. We modernized classrooms, and you can see all the arrows going to those modernized classrooms. We improved the playground areas. In some of the playgrounds, we add equipment. Some of them, we just take out the sand and we put down soft rubber bases so that we get rid of some of the problems of traipsing and sand into the buildings themselves. We take a look at renovating and existing the NPR kitchen building in the media center. And at one time we said, let's remove the art storage building, the one out front. But we've got a little issue in regards to the electrical, so that might be, if we can remove it and we can redo the electrical for a reasonable cost, then let's do that. If not, let's maintain something there to house that electrical. Also, the Barry and Washington Theater, the new community theater down the street, has been added, and there's new signs and things that we need to add so that we can make sure that we have safe crossings and so that the parking can be utilized at that location. Because I believe, current, right? There's some agreement that we can use that during the school day.
Yeah, there's a shared agreement. The board just approved it, Tim. That's for the Brennan Center.
So any questions on that? Mike, fill in any gap that I have on that.
No, I think you've covered it fairly extensively, particularly on the issues of parking. I will say that we looked at doing a reroute of your pickup and drop off. And it ended up being a choice of basically taking down all of the trees along the street there in order to run a extended parking line through there, or not even parking line, just pick up and drop off. You don't even park there. As well as the new state requirements on construction of parking lots and driveways, which is what that would be considered. You basically have to do a runoff study these days if you're going to do something like that and make provision for dealing with your runoff from the asphalt if you add anything. So that makes it somewhat cost prohibitive. So.
I'm just unclear on the multi-purpose room. Are we still going to have it functioning as a theater and a place for people to gather? Because we all know that we've gone to see things at the elementary school and it's not even big enough for what we have going on there. So I don't think I really understand compared to what the first bond master plan said we were going to do with that room and what you guys are suggesting.
We can't go outside the footprint. Okay, so if we can reorganize the inside of the building and gain space in the multi-purpose room, that's how we would approach it. Now the freezer cooler, because they're considered not permanent, we can move those outside and we can put them in a footprint exterior. But that would gain us some space. But we do need to reorganize that kitchen no matter what. But you're right. I mean, the first master plan or the master plan previous said, let's expand this, make it big and do all those things, but you can't do it because of the flood zone. Any clarification on that, Mike?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
And then my other question was, in terms of the electrical inside of that art supply room, could you just not tear everything down and just leave a little small building that houses the electrical part?
Yeah, that's one of the thoughts that we had was that how much space do we actually have to have there in order to maintain the electrical? The other thing is, can we reroute it and not cost us a lot? But you know, that was the original location of the electrical coming to this campus. So it's been there since year one of the building of this campus. So and I know it's probably going to be pretty messy, you know, and so we're going to have to weigh the costs, you know, what's the least expensive and the best functional approach to it.
Yeah. I will tell you that unless Chris tells me that you already had a mitigation project down in that space, you are likely to have a toxics mitigation project before you move any of that old equipment out. So that's one of the major costs for that, as well as a new transformer and a new switch and wiring things elsewhere. So,
and there's a pause here that we haven't thoroughly looked at, and it's something that we've talked about, is it is a footprint and it is an existing footprint. Okay, so since it is there, it may be some kind of functional space that we could use if we tore it all down and rebuilt it. you know, can we do that and stay within the guidelines of CDE and DSA? And maybe we gain something out of that versus, you know, it all coming down and we moving the electrical. So those are the kinds of things when we get to the next step of implementation is to take a look at that kind of, you know, the cost factor that goes into it.
Right.
Right now, we've got a cost factor in there of maintaining it, and we've got a cost factor in there of improving at least the structural system so that we can keep the rain out.
Right.
It looks like Indira has another question, guys.
Yes, it was along the lines of what Julie was asking in regards to the MPR. But also, I mean, what is you were talking about including media center? What are you referring to that? Is that adding a media center there, or?
That's the former computer lab next to your library.
Remember Indira where we used to have the board meetings when it was first built? That little,
Yeah, but I thought it was part of the library, and that wasn't that part of the renovations the last time that something was done?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm confused.
Right.
Yeah. So quickly things change. Computer spaces are no longer needed as time goes on. We don't have computer studios anymore. You have some studios that might be in the CTE program where there's specialized studios that do graphical design and some of those kind of things, or work with the 3D printers. But as classrooms get their own computers and kids have their own computers, computer core areas go away. And so it's not a right now it's not a functional space.
Thank you.
So, this is Jeff, I got a question. So the courtyard between the library and the multipurpose room, can that be expanded into, or is it got to stay in the current footprint of how it is now?
We took a look at that when we were first looking at this entire building, because I was an advocate of pushing the building footprint out until we hit this issue with the flood zone. The problem is that area which has the built out stage on the backside and that other courtyard area is not considered to be built space. So you cannot expand into it, unfortunately.
Well, that sucks.
That's a good way of putting it.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think if you talk to Aaron or Maureen or Chris, you know, this was a big shock to everybody when we discovered this. And we've gone to CDE and DSA and OPSC a number of times just to make sure that we had the clarification that we needed to make the call. And so believe me, we didn't want to really appraise the district of this issue, but you know, we got to know now, because later on, if you build something on this campus and you have to put it 7 feet above the ground, you know, now we got another big issue, and that's access.
Thank you.
Okay, we can jump into the high school maybe. Junior high school, next slide. Thank you. So on this site, we have capabilities of expanding, and we've got capabilities of taking some of the buildings, some of the older buildings down and building new buildings. And I know that Mike talked a little bit about the U-shaped building over on the corner of the campus. And, you know, I know there's been a couple different studies of that building. And the last study that was completed said, you know, replacing it is less expensive than trying to modernize. And the other problem with modernizing is the functionality of it. It's a very strict structural system that is difficult to do too much with, other than to just rebuild it the same way that it is today. And so functionally, it doesn't really work, especially when we get into new science programs, new technical education programs, art programs, all those kinds of programs. So it's just not the kind of building that you want to deal with from a functional standpoint as well as the cost standpoint. So the first thing that happens on this campus is a new structure that replaces that and kind of moves some things around in that same area. And it's about a 14,000 square foot building. And what we're saying is it should be 2 stories, because that leaves us some groundwork to deal with in regards to circulation and a new road that comes through for fire access. The second building, and it basically would house science rooms and a career tech area and some more bathrooms, some staff bathrooms, as well as student bathrooms, which will help out in regards to the overall campus restroom facilities. So that's what, there's some implications once we start doing that, because it's pretty isolated. We can isolate it away, but we have some need for some of those classrooms. So we might have to bring in, and one of the numbers that we've put into the cost estimates has been the temporary housing that we might have to bring in, just so that we can accommodate during the construction. That's building 1. Building 2 would be a new administration building that would go next to this building. And if you flip to the campus master plan, which is the next, there we go. So the blue building is what we're talking about. Okay, so that what went away was the U-shaped building. There's a couple modulars, a couple relocatables in there, so that we would move those relocatables to another place on campus if we can, so that we can reuse them. And then the 2 gray areas are new parking areas that expand out into that area. So phase 1 is the new 2-story science and CTE program. Phase 2 is the new administration. And then the next thing we would do is modernize the administration building. We would gain 5 classrooms. Once we do that, we'd move the library out to where the current theater and art complex is located, and we modernize that into a library, which puts it more centrally located, which is better for the entire campus. And then we would create a new theater where the current library is, and it would be a black box theater, much larger, much more functional, and it's on the front of the campus, so it's accessible from the parking without getting all the way into the campus. And then the third building that would be built in, would be the 7-8 new building that would replace the current buildings that are on that campus, so that we can get a 21st century 7-8 complex. And as building that, it would help us do a little bit more isolation between the 7-8 program and the 9-12 program. And then modernizing the gym, the old gym. And I know this has been on everybody's list, modernizing the old gym, creating new locker rooms. And we'd also put a new entrance on the north side of the building, so that it would work with that plaza between the multi-purpose room and the rest of the campus.
As well as new ventilation and HVAC.
And we would replace the perimeter fencing with a more permanent fencing that doesn't have holes in it, and access points that are not controlled. And we would have a better control system because it would be through a one-stop building versus various locations around the campus. The red in this picture is the Athletic Booster Club master plan. And we were very careful about how we plan things just so that we didn't interrupt anything that's going to happen in regards to the Booster Club work. In fact, I think it works really well with the access to the sports programs from the MAKE campus. And down the line, if all went together and it became available, maybe the property that's kind of niching out the corner down on the right might be something that you would take a look at purchasing. It's not necessary to buy, other than it helps in regards to some of the sports programs and some of the continuity of the fields, but it's just it's there, and it's something that we just noted. Any questions about this? So if you went back one page, sorry. There we go. This is all those programs kind of talk what we're doing at each one of these. And there's always the end one there. It says site-wide systems. We need updated fire alarm, clock bell, speaker, low voltage. All those things need to be updated as we go through. And we need to make sure that we have a master plan component that covers those items as we develop the campus. Anything else, Mike, that I missed on that?
I think that's it.
Okay, so back to the campus master plan. Okay, and then one more. So implementation sequencing, and if you flip to the next one just for a second. Next slide, just for a second. So this is, when you look at your book, this is the programs that we're going to talk about, but they're basically a repeat of the information that we just did for the elementary and the middle and the junior high school sites. And so this just kind of talks about when it might be done. And we have to caution here because things move rapidly sometimes, and sometimes they move slowly. And we never have a control like at DSA, the Department of State Architect, or some of the other things that happen. So this is a plan. This implementation schedule will be modified, typically every month, as we go through the process of implementation. So if you go back one, sorry. So this is the sequencing. We start with the Calistoga Elementary School with the modernizing multi-purpose buildings 1 through 6 modernization and upgrading the playgrounds. And then we step into the senior high and do building 1, building 2, the parking lot 1, the old gym, the new building number 3, the existing administration building modernization, and the plaza improvements. What you don't see here is where do you have to stop because you run out of money. What we hopefully will be able to do is all of the elementary school stuff, at least building number 1 and probably building number 2, at least through the DSA submittal. Now, there's some funds out there that we're counting on that we don't know yet until the state allows some release of some additional money, and that's the reimbursement for the junior high and the high school and the elementary school. Isn't that right, Mike? It's the three of them.
The district has some eligibility for state bond funding, but given that the system is currently hopelessly backlogged and has no funding in it, there won't be any new funds put in unless and until at the very least the proposed 2022 state bond measure is passed. When that passes, they'll take up the backlog as well as picking up new projects. And Ken, you might want to talk a little bit about how that particular provision might benefit the district.
Yeah, and again, it's all, things that are in the works right now. We don't have, a final bill that's been approved that's going to be on a ballot, but again, and looking at what's being proposed, there's a lot of great direction in that they're proposing that projects are reviewed and approved within 4 months of them being submitted. Because right now, the projects that are currently being approved were submitted 3 years ago. And so that's why it's a little dysfunctional right now is, you design a project and you have to wait 3 years for the state to review it. Your plans are about to expire if you didn't have the money to go ahead and move on the project yourself before it's even looked at. And then again, there's going to be some new special items within that bond that may provide some special funding for certain types of projects. So that's why it's always great to have a master plan so we know, what types of projects you're looking at and what funds might be available as new funding sources are developed. But yeah, we're hopeful that a bond ends up on the 2022 ballot, either in June or November, and that it passes so that, again, matching funds for various projects the district is looking at can become available.
One of the items in the current proposed language that might be of interest to the district is they have some very specific dedicated CTE funding. And that might be applicable to a number of the classrooms that you might want to look at in buildings 1 and 2. Okay, so
Maureen has identified maybe around $21 million in funds with the various funds that you currently have. Of course, some of that requires another bond sales or another 2 bond sales in order to do it. But we've worked out all the numbers based on the schedule that follows this page. And so we've balanced it, and we're working with Maureen to make sure that we kind of know how far you can go before we have to stop in the priorities that are listed here. So I think that's about it. There's 41 pages in this document, and that's the 41 pages.
I'll just mention a couple other things, Tim, about funding. So Tim was correct. We have about 21 million to get started on everything. That'll get us through probably the first couple of years, but part of that 21 million is going out and selling the 18.8 we have left in bonds. Right now, if we were to go sell today, we could sell up to 10 million of that 18.8 because we want to stay under the tax rate that we had back in 2010 when we passed the bonds. So that allows us a $10 million sale. That'll get us through the next couple years, next year and a half, depending on how fast this timeline moves that we've got projected here. And then we'll have to talk about going out and getting the other 8.8 million. But in order to finish all of these projects, we would have to go out for another bond eventually. So that is something that the boards, eventually, we don't need to talk about that tonight or discuss it tonight, but I want to put that out there that these projects would require another about $24 million bond. So half of probably what we did the last time in 2010. That being said, of course, we're going to need to talk in greater detail about that in the future with our financial advisor and figure out the board will need to make that decision about what's the best way to go about all of that. But that is the idea of getting through the entire master plan.
So if you go back, if you go forward one, so you can see those two dots where you're selling and then using the money. And this stretches, if you really go to the end, it's like 2027. And obviously we won't be building much past about 2024, 25 without running out of money.
That's correct.
So that's it. In from our side, is any more questions?
Well, and one thing I just want to let the board know too is what I'd like to do with this implementation schedule is summarize the schedule a little bit more, but then have a cost analysis for each of the projects following the implementation schedule. So it'll be a lot more clear to a reader and to the board what each project will cost through each implementation stage, and then the final cost estimate of that project. So that's to come with the final version.
Any other questions from the board?
That's a lot to digest. So obviously between now and the next meeting, we can come and talk and ask questions if we, right?
Julie, that was going to be my next question, is whether or not the board would like me to put this back on the April 12th agenda just for more discussion, or if you would like to bring it back actually for approval.
So obviously, I just want to remind everybody, this is just a plan. This is a plan. We're not approving any spending. We're not approving the order of anything. This is just this is us putting out our vision into the future of what we need to do. And I guess I just want to hear from Aaron and Chris, both of you. We had all the stakeholders have their say, which I think is great, but do you feel, as the people who really see the workings of the district, that this plan is what you foresee is the best route?
Chris, do you want to speak first, or would you like me to go?
I think it does a good job of addressing a lot of the things that I see that need to be done, specifically CTE and expanding to accommodate that program, as well as the gym here. It serves a good purpose. I mean, we're a small district, but we got 2 gyms, but it really does serve a good purpose to have kind of junior high have their own gym and the high school have their own gym. And this one's long overdue for some love, and I'm excited to see that on there. I am pretty sad about the elementary school, and you know, I did some research too, just to find out if there's workarounds or anything on that. And I am excited to get that back area. I like the idea to use that back area of the riverbank for kindergarten. Before we had that big pipe problem, that was an area that kindergarten used pretty often. And I think that'll be a big plus for the elementary school. But I think based on the community meetings, it's covered the requests from the staff and the public as best we can with with what we got.
Julie, I agree. I appreciate the work that SchoolWorks team did and IEP2 did, just to get input from our staff and community. I think it's a great plan. I think it's focusing on the areas that we need to focus. So I'm for bringing it forward on April 12th for approval, but we can again have a more discussion if you feel comfortable with that as a board.
I would throw it to the other board members, but personally, I think that it's better that we get going on it.
I agree. A lot of time and effort's gone into this, and as we've gotten down the road, we've been talking about the 2-story building for a number of years now, and time moving. And that, of course, that 2-story building on the high school can be, we talked about it being adaptable. I mean, movable walls and so on and so forth. So we're not stuck, because as we're seeing, we spent a bunch of money on that computer room and it's outdated, so we got to be able to be flexible. So.
This, I think this is just a point of clarification for me, but is the 2-story building going to replace those portables that were there from the 70s?
Yes.
And are those are the buildings? I got the impression, and this could be incorrect, that those buildings are borderline students shouldn't be in them kind of thing.
I wouldn't go
I
to,
wouldn't say that they're unsafe.
Okay, okay.
They're-
Thank you for that.
Yeah, they're marginally functional at best. You can't do anything to open up the walls or do anything to make additional spaces out of them, because all of the walls are shear walls. They basically are 960 square foot boxes. You can't change the walls, you can't change the ceiling, and it's difficult even to run additional electrical or other utilities into them. And they're old. They're just, Tim will kick me for this one, but I have a saying that those things are like lipstick on a pig. There's not much more that you can do to them to make them any more functional. So.
Also, those are the only buildings that we've done nothing to. So
Okay.
we've upgraded a lot of the other buildings. Almost everything's been touched in one way or another, except for those buildings, right, Jeff?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those
Okay.
are the first on the schedule that are going to be on the improvement.
I believe they are slated to be replaced by building number 1 and building number 2.
Okay. So I agree with Jeff that we should get moving. This has been 2 years in the making, and it sounds like we should move forward.
Is everybody okay if I stop sharing my screen?
Go ahead. So then I understand that everybody's saying that we should go ahead and have this earmarked for the next meeting.
Thank you. What I also didn't mention is, it's really restricting our science programs at the high school in particular. So the longer we wait, the longer those programs are restricted. Thank you. I'll bring it back to the next agenda for approval. I want to thank Ken and Tim and Mike for all the work that you put into this thus far and for the presentation tonight. I appreciate it.
and our Aaron, who silently sits there
Yes.
and helps me, and Paula helping me make sure that I spell things correctly.
Yes. Thank you, Aaron, for that. Appreciate it. And for coming tonight.
Great.
Okay.
So you all know you don't have to stay for the rest of our meeting.
Okay,
We will not be offended if you drop off. and
okay.
relax
Okay.
The rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Bye.
Great. So then that moves us forward to consent agenda. And just a reminder, actions proposed for the consent agenda are deemed routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion of these items unless any member of the board, the audience, or staff requests specific items be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. So unless anybody has any questions, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Stephanie. All in favor? Aye. Perfect. Don't forget, you guys, everybody's got to unmute. Oh, it's a roll call vote. So President Elkishan, aye. Clerk Lopez Jones,
Aye.
Trustee Maxfield,
Aye.
Trustee Gonzalez,
Aye.
and Trustee Rothberg Allen.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on to 5.1, action items. So protocol for action items includes staff presentation, questions from the board, public input, deliberation by the board, and voting by the board. And during public input, there's a 3-minute time limit per person. So I believe that Maureen is going to present to us Measure A Bond Final Audit Report.
This is our 1920 Measure A Bond Final Audit Report. So the auditors do come in on top of doing our regular audit. They were at our last meeting doing our regular audit report. They also do a final report on all of our bond funds. And so this is just a summary of the report. There were no findings for this year and no corrective actions to clean up for the last year because we didn't have any findings last year either. One of the things they do mention in this report, and I will mention tonight because we have one interested community volunteer member that wants to be on the committee in our board meeting right now, but we do have a bond oversight committee that we cannot hold right now because we don't have enough members. We have one application at this point in time and need to have 6 others in order to get the committee together. So still working on that, always advertising on our website. Again, if anybody knows anybody that would love to be on our bond committee, it's going to become very important, as you know, tonight doing our master plan moving forward. It's going to be very important that we have a community sharing of what we're doing with our bond funds. So if you know anybody that you might think would be good to sit on the committee, please by all means send them my name so I can reach out to them and talk to them about getting on the committee. So other than that, I didn't even tell you about how much we spent last year, but let me get to that page just so you know. We didn't spend all that much. We ended with about a $922,000 balance. Remember back in 2017, you refunded bonds as a district for about $1 million that went into this fund. And so out of that $1 million, about three years ago, we have about 922,000 left. We spent the funds this last year on doing some architecture work for our bathrooms and also way back in the fall, some security camera work. So that's what we spent the money on. And it was about 53,000 in spending that we did in 1920. So again, ending fund balance, 922,000. That's what we started this year with. And you will see this report again around this time next year because it's a yearly audit that is done for this fund. Any questions from the board?
So I'm just looking for a motion to go ahead and accept the bond audit report as presented by Maureen.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Perfect. Okay, and then unless there's anything else, I'm looking for Jeff's favorite motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.
No.
Aye.
Good night.
Aye.